Sports Fantasies with Miller and McCarty.
Welcome back, Sports Fantasies with Miller and McCarty. We're doing a special episode tonight. We're welcoming in a guest host for the first time in a long time. We have one Mr. Jim Sinicropi with us from Finger Lakes One. He does the Upstate Hoops podcast and also does some play calling for them on there as well. Jim graduated from Syracuse University a couple years ago, and we're excited to have him on with us. So I'm going to give Jim a chance to talk about himself for a second, and then we'll jump right into the show.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Yeah, it was just a couple years ago that I graduated from Syracuse, 1995. I don't know if I'm the oldest guy you ever had on your podcast.
I wasn't giving that out.
I'm glad you asked me. Looking forward to talking sports, fantasy football. And at the end of the show, I got a story about my first experience with fantasy sports, which was I played fantasy sports before the internet. Things were a lot different back then. Nice. So I'll talk about that at the end of the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, we're real excited to have you on. And, maybe this could happen again down the road if you don't run away and hide from us after this. But let's jump right into it, guys. We're going to start off with segment one. We're going to go fantasy football. So we decided to go top 5 rookies. Each host will give their top 5. So I think what we're going to do here is each of us will give 5, 4, and 3. And then we'll go ping pong style for 2 and 1. So Jim, you're the guest, so you get to go first. If you want to give us your number 5, 4, and 3 rookie fantasy football players.
Sure. It's tough to do this before the draft because I think so much with rookies depends on like the situation that they get drafted into, based on how I would draft them in a fantasy draft. But I am interested to see where these guys end up because I think any of these top 5 could, make an impact this year. So my 5, 4, and 3 for me is Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. If he gets with the right team, he could see immediate action, and he's also very flexible, more of a wide receiver, I guess, than a tight end. But in the right situation, he could put up big numbers. I like Malik Neighbors from LSU. Again, depending on the situation he's drafted into. But a sleeper that might not go to the second round is Roman Wilson from Michigan. He didn't get as many targets due to Michigan's strong rushing attack in college, but I kind of picture him as a Puka Nacua type that could come into the league and get a lot of yards after the catch. And so I'm interested to see where he goes to.
Yeah, that's a deep sleeper at 3.
I love it that he went off the board there because I love it. Guy comes in just dropping things out of left field. McCarty, what about your 5, 4, and 3?
All right, number 5, I agreed with Jim. I got Brock Bowers here, and he'll be the first tight end off the board. Obviously, the thing I think that's helping me with that. We've seen Pitts as the last highly kind of just huge prospect, and that hasn't panned out yet. I still think there's hope. But I think what helps me with Bowers is the success last year of Kincaid. Success of Kincaid and Laporta. That shows me that first-round tight ends can still be valuable, so I like that. Number 4, I went Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, 17 touchdowns as a junior last year, 6'3", 209, had a great combine, ran a 4.340. And then my number 3, I believe this was Jim's number 4, Malik Neighbors. As a freshman, had 72 catches, over 1,000 yards, and then really broke out last year. He's projected to be a top 8 to 10 pick in the draft. But like Jim said, if one of these receivers not on this list, let's say they go to Buffalo in the first round or somewhere that's in need of a wide receiver, then all of these rankings could change. But that's my 5, 4, 3.
All right, so I'll make it a consensus number 5. Brock Bowers is also my number 5. He led or tied for the league lead in receptions, yards, and touchdowns all 3 years at Georgia. My number 4, McCarty, we match here with Brian Thomas. But LSU in touchdown receptions nearly matched Neighbors in yards per catch. He lost by about 0.3 yards per catch. And number 3, Rome Odunze from Washington led the nation receiving yards with 1640. So I think all 3 of those guys, no matter where they go, unless of course they end up in a situation where Mac Jones is their quarterback, I think they're going to be just fine in the top 5. All right, Jim, we'll go your number 2, then we'll get McCarty's number 2 and my number 2, and then we'll do the same thing with number 1. So you can go ahead and get us kicked off with your number 2, Jim.
I'm going with Roma Dunes from Washington as well. I was kind of enthralled with their run through the college football playoffs and their prolific offense, and he seems like he'd be a great fit at any place with an established quarterback. Maybe come in first year being a number 3 guy or even a 4 guy, maybe get an opportunity because of injury, but I think he could have a big year. And this list, I didn't pick any quarterbacks because from a fantasy perspective, CJ Stroud I think was kind of an outlier last year. I'm usually with rookies in fantasy football, I'm looking for wide receivers and running backs. And there's also no running backs in my top 5 because there just doesn't seem to be that many highly rated. But, I think you can find a running back in a good situation, that maybe is a 3rd or 4th round pick in the draft that could have an impact this year too.
Yeah, McCarty and I will tend to agree with you, especially about the quarterbacks. The only way that we start putting quarterbacks in the top 5 is if it's a 2-quarterback league, because that changes things a little bit. Obviously, quarterbacks become a little more valuable at that point. But I think, not trying to speak for McCarty, but we've done this a couple of times, so I don't believe that either of us would disagree with that. And this running back class is bad. McCarty, you're number 2.
Yeah, Jim's a smart guy. I got Odunes, however you say his name, as the number 2 as well. And really kind of for the same reason. I didn't really know much about him until the Final Four run there, the college playoff run. And because I think Neighbors, Odunes, you could flip-flop those. But to me, it was just all about the eye test. He was that number 1 on the field. Every time Washington needed a big play, that's where he went. He made some incredible catches, runs good routes. He just, again, for me, the eye test, I think eventually he's going to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL.
So my number 2 is a guy that both of you had at 4. It's Malik Neighbors. He ranked top 8 nationally in reception yards and touchdowns. I like him a little more than Odunze, but that's just me. I tend to get these things wrong. That's why, McCarty's also here, so one of us knows what we're talking about. Jim, you're number 1. I assume we all have the same number 1 unless there's a shot coming.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr., right?
That's it.
That was my number 1.
I loved his dad at Syracuse, and then for the Colts, had him on a lot of fantasy teams. He seems like he's cut from the same cloth. Part of me wish he went in the transfer portal to Syracuse and Fran Brown along with his quarterback this year, but instead he's going to the draft. And I think, it's a can't miss there. It's just a can't miss pick. He's the only rookie that I feel like would be a can't miss pick.
Yeah, I of course have him as at 1 as well, and he has to be the number 1 pick in everybody's, regardless of where he goes. He's going to be the number 1 pick in every draft, unless a Superflex league wants to take Caleb Williams or something. But even in the Superflex league, Marvin Harrison, I'm taking over a quarterback at number 1. And there's been some issues. Well. There's been some issues, or at least being reported about different things in the outfield and him not participating in the combine and things like that. But again, there's going to be different reports that come out. I think he's still the number 1. He grades out similar to Jamar Chase, and I expect from day 1 he's going to be starting in your fantasy lineup.
Well, I mean, he is a wide receiver, so of course he's a diva.
That's true.
Yeah. There's a lot of good running backs in this draft too. They're just not going to be, at the top of people's lists. They're going to be drafted a little later. You might not see a running back go in the entire first round of this draft potentially, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to steal a couple guys late in your fantasy draft that are going to end up, being starters, a few weeks into the season even. Guys like Jonathan Brooks from Texas or Jalen Wright from Tennessee, Blake Corum from Michigan.
Yeah.
100% agree. It would be interesting because there were a couple running backs that got hurt at the end of the year too in college that may have made the back end of this list if they were going to be healthy from day one, but no one's really sure what to expect coming off major surgeries. So, all right, I believe that we can move on to Kiss or Kick. Jim, I'm going to give you the choice here since you are the guest. You've never played Kiss or Kick, so do you want to lead us off here, or do you want McCarty to lead us off here?
So this is basically where we make a prediction, and you guys either kick it or
then
kiss it.
We kiss or kick it. Yeah. Correct.
Okay, I got one.
So if you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Will be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver next season in Cincinnati.
I would kick. Miller's a big T. Higgins guy, though, so
I'm going to kick that as well. McCarty, I don't know where your sound effect is. I mean, I was waiting for it.
I know. I don't have it.
I love T. Higgins. I will put a disclaimer here. If T. Higgins ends up in Buffalo, he will be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver next year because there are some of those rumblings out there. Don't know how much tread there is on those tires, but if he came to Buffalo, I believe he would be a top 10 receiver, but being in Cincy, who knows if Burrow will even be healthy. So, all right, you got another one, Jim?
Yeah, a lot of questions there. You want my number 2?
Yep, go ahead.
Fire it away.
Russell Wilson will be a top 10 fantasy quarterback next season in Pittsburgh.
Whatever.
No, I don't think so. I'm kicking Russell. You could have given me top 20. I think I might kick it.
Poor Russ.
It's a good situation for him. I mean, he was top 10 in Denver this year before he got benched at the end of the season. I mean, he was having a pretty productive year.
That's fair. It wouldn't shock me if he came out and had some type of a comeback at some point, but I'd have to kick it if I was putting pesos on it.
I'm curious to see if him and Tomlin get along. Tomlin is similar, a similar coach to the guy in Denver there, Sean Payton. He runs his team a certain type of way. If he doesn't like the way somebody responds to him, he's not afraid to get rid of him. So, and they have Justin Fields there, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
McCarty.
Right, the host is taking a drink of water. He was sweating over that question. He was parched. My 2. First one, with the recent moves that Houston has made to acquire Mixon and Diggs, kiss or kick, Houston has the best offense in the AFC right now, on paper.
Anything about Diggs is getting kicked, so that's all I have to say about that. They could potentially have the best offense on paper, but we know that football isn't played on paper. Although I think what Houston did in eliminating Diggs' last 2 years of his contract and making it a 1-year deal is super smart. I think he's going to probably play at a high level.
Yeah, I'm going to kick it too. Collins and Tank both had injury issues. I don't think necessarily bringing Diggs in at this point in his career is a guaranteed win. He could even disrupt some things. I mean, he was non-existent in Buffalo the whole second half of the season.
Yeah.
Not a true number 1 wide receiver anymore by that indication. And I think there's a lot of Houston Texans hype because of how they did in the postseason this year, but they barely snuck into the playoffs. I mean, if Indianapolis, in the last week of the season pulls it off, then they're not even in the playoffs. So then they end up getting a home game. So I just think that the Houston Texans hype train is at an all-time high right now. And then they add Stephon Diggs. Everybody wants to give him the Super Bowl ring. I don't know. It'd be tough to replicate. Sophomore slump maybe for Stroud too.
That's fair. All right, my second one, I didn't write anything down, so let's just this is only for you, Jim. Kiss or kick, this being the greatest podcast that you've ever been a part of. I know it's early in the segment one, but
no, I like. I'll kiss it. I like the Sunday night at 9:00. Today was a great sports day. We, the women's national championship game, incredible finish in the PGA tournament. I think Nelly Korda won her 4th straight. She was LPGA event. It was a good sports day. So what better time to do it than Sunday night?
What a way to cap it off. A great sports day right here on Sports Fantasies. All right, Miller, you're up.
Every once in a while, Jim will do these during like the NFL draft. So we have the draft on in the background, and then we'll do a show, which can be a lot of fun. And we'll see where it goes and what happens, but we really need a few more subscribers. If you know anyone looking to watch a podcast with a couple idiots running it. All right, kiss or kick. Marvin Harrison Jr. being a top 10 wide receiver as a rookie.
Again, it's tough to tell until you find out exactly where he's going, but I'm gonna kiss it. There's always a couple rookies that really break through, and he's the best candidate this year, so I like it. Top 10 wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. First step on his way to the Hall of Fame in Canton.
This is a tough one.
Heard it here first, folks.
This is a tough one because it does depend a lot on the landing spot, but I'm assuming he's going to go to a place that doesn't have a big-time true number one, and even if so, if they do, maybe that even helps. If he can slide in as the number 2 wide receiver and take some pressure off him, then that's probably beneficial too, either way. So I'm going to kiss it as well. I think I don't see him top 5, but I think he can sneak into the top 10 this year. Yeah.
I love it. Perfect. All right. Kiss or kick number 2, Mr. Bowers being a top 5 tight end as a rookie.
I'm going to kick it. It's potentially something that could happen, but you see it. There's always a few tight ends that come into the league every year that are super hyped, and everybody wants to get them, and they reach for them in the draft, and then sometimes they end up, not even playing a factor. So it could happen, but I'm going to kick it. Unlikely top 5. Too many good established tight ends already.
Yeah, I'd kick it as well. I think there's 3 or 4 that for sure he's not going to beat out, even if he has a pretty good season relative to what tight ends do. And like Jim said, it's impossible to tell when he comes in if he's going to be, how often is he going to be on the field? They're going to be working with him more on blocking? How many routes is he going to run as a rookie tight end? What situation is he in? So it wouldn't be a shock if he snuck into the top 5 if the team utilizes him. But I think it would be I think it's more of a long shot that he's finishing top 5.
Yeah, I think the big question is he more like Sam Laporta or is he more like Kyle Pitts? Because McCarty's been waiting for Kyle Pitts to, do anything for 4 years now.
This is the year, baby.
Kind of
quarterback.
Like typical Buffalo Bills fan. There's always next year. That's our motto. All right. With that being said, let's get right into our 12-pick mock draft. So each of us get 4 picks. Jim, again, you're the host or the guest. So we gave you the 1, 4, 7, and 10 picks. McCarty 2, 5, 8, 11. Miller 3, 6, 9, 12. So, Jim, where are you going to take us with the number 1 pick in the Sports Fantasies of Miller and McCarty mock draft?
Well, when I get ready for a draft, and I'm in one league now. I used to be in a lot of leagues, but I stick to just one league now. It's a league that it's been going on now with me and my buddies, the same 14 guys for over 20 years. And our scoring system is a little different. It's a little quarterback heavy, even though it's a 1 quarterback league. But I'm assuming that this draft would be for one more standard scoring systems, maybe PPR. But either way, no matter what the scoring system is, if I had the number 1 pick, I couldn't take anybody but Christian McCaffrey. I mean, I don't always like taking last year's number 1 guy first, the following year, because if you look at preseason rankings at the end of the year, they never seem to pan out, like you expect. But McCaffrey's, one of a kind, and you'd be well on your way to a championship with McCaffrey as one of your running backs.
All right. That's fair. Mr. McCarty.
I'm pick 2, huh? All right, then. Give me my guy. I have a number 1, Justin Jefferson, 24 years old, 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. I know they lost Cousins, but I feel like he's one of those quarterback-proof wide receivers.
He does have Sam Darnold.
Well, okay, maybe not that quarterback-proof. I'm hoping to do something a little more than that. But before the injury last year and the season before, 128 catches, 1,800 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's my pick 2.
All right. So then I have pick 3. I'm going to go
Darnold
Jamar
could be a
Chase
this year too, by the way.
He definitely could be. He may have finally put it all together after his time in San Francisco. At number 3, I'm going to go Jamar Chase, and I'm going to hope that Joe Burrow actually is healthy and stays healthy. And, I'm going to see where he goes and what he does. But I feel pretty confident with the 3rd pick taking Jamar Chase. Jim, that brings us back to you with pick 4.
I can't believe you guys let Tyreek Hill come back to me. So, he's my number 2 overall. He just, again, is a one-of-a-kind talent. Nobody can do what he does, and nobody can have games as huge as he does. So I'll take Tyreek Hill to go along with McCaffrey.
To be fair, Jim, if you have older guys, higher in your rankings, you're probably going to get them, because McCarty and I are kind of, we do mostly dynasty leagues now. We do mostly salary cap leagues. And with dynasty salary cap leagues, we tend to look young early and often. So it's probably actually skewed our views a little bit, where sometimes we'll ignore the older guys just so we can go young, and hopefully they pan out. Although someone like Kyle Pitts can really bite you in
any
dynasty.
In any dynasty league I've ever been into, I try not to get too focused on the youth. I just try to win the next year, because it seems like by the time you do your roster cut downs and everything and have your college draft or however your rule system works, I try to win the year that's ahead of me. I don't try to stock up for the future as much as maybe other guys do.
It's definitely a balance. I'm not as big in the future as McCarty is. So, McCarty, pick 5.
Pick 5, I would go wide receiver again. I'd go with the wide receiver 1 from last season, CeeDee Lamb. 135 catches, 1,750 yards. There was a time there, first couple of years of his career, I didn't know if he was going to become that elite wide receiver 1, but over the last season or 2, he's gotten rid of that doubt. So that's my pick at 5.
So my pick at 6 is a guy that McCarty just hates on because of where he was drafted in the real NFL draft, and that is Amon St. Brown, wide receiver from Detroit. Yeah. I'm a huge St. Brown guy. I love him. He's young. He's super athletic. and he's a guy that gets a lot of catches and can run after the catch. So I'm fine taking St. Brown at 6. That brings us back to you, Jim, at 7.
I love the St. Brown pick. I've had him the past couple of years, and he's so consistent, and every now and then he really breaks out and he has a huge game. But, geez, at this point, there's a lot of good wide receivers, good young wide receivers too. So if you guys are looking dynasty, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, but I'm going to go out on a limb and take Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's a special player, and I think he's going to have that type of Hall of Fame career, and running backs in their sophomore year a lot of times break out. I expect a big year from Jahmyr Gibbs, so I'm going to reach for him and take him with my 3rd pick.
That's a little bit of a reach, but I don't hate it.
I love that.
He's on both of our lists.
I love that pick, and I actually
Miller
had him rated one spot ahead in the draft. If St. Brown wasn't there, I would have taken Gibbs. Go ahead, McCarty.
When you talk about eye test with guys, that Jahmyr Gibbs, every time he touches the ball, you can tell he's a special talent. And I'm going to try to get him this year. I'm going to probably overreach for him in my drafts this year.
Yeah, 1,300 all-purpose yards, and that was splitting touches with Montgomery. So definitely a special talent. So pick 8. I'll keep the running back theme going, and I would go Bijan Robinson here. Of course, I feel like he got a little bit of a bad rap after year 1. People already calling him a bust or didn't live up to he had ridiculous expectations coming into the season, and I don't even see it as a down year. I thought it was still a pretty good rookie year. 15 fantasy points per game, had 980 yards rushing, 58 catches for another 500 yards. To me, especially with an offense that struggled, and when teams are game planning against you, that's a pretty successful rookie year. So I think the sky's the limit for Bijan.
Don't hate it. Don't hate it at all. So with pick 9, I'm going to actually go Breece Hall. So we had a little mini run on running backs here. Of course, Hall is young. He did have the major injury, but seems to be back and looking okay. They brought in Dalvin Cook in case he wasn't ready, and Dalvin Cook ended up on another team and with very few yards. So I think Breece Hall is ready to take that next step, and I would be very happy to get him at pick 9. So, all right, Jim, you're kicking off our last couple of picks here at pick 10. Where are you going to go at pick 10?
I always like getting a tight end, the best tight end, Travis Kelce being available. But, is this the year that he starts to decline a little bit? So I'm going to stay away from Kelce, and I'm going to go with a more predictable, reliable pick. I'm going to take another running back in Jonathan Taylor. You can't have too many running backs, and I find that if you stock up early, there's plenty of wide receivers you can find later in the draft. So I'm taking a 3rd running back in Jonathan Taylor.
Well, that was going to be my pick, so thanks a lot, Jim. All right, pick 11.
All right, McCarty, where are you going? Pick 11.
That's it. Oh, this is a tough one. I've got about 4 guys I could go here, so I got to think, okay, if this, who would I actually take here? And you know what? I think right here, I would go a guy we already talked about it a minute ago, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh, wow.
Last couple seasons in college, 144 catches, 2,500 yards, 28 touchdowns. It's a little bit of a gamble there, but if I'm just the way I like to set up a team, like let's say I've got him on the board, you've got a guy like A.J. Brown. I think I'm going to lean the younger Harrison, even though A.J. is a guaranteed wide receiver 1 for a few more seasons. I just like the upside of Marvin so much. I could take him there.
All right, and that brings it back to me at pick 12. And McCarty, you already know what the pick's going to be. I can't go a whole first round mock draft and not see JA-17 come off the board. So
Oh,
with
no.
the last pick in the first
Oh,
round,
no.
I'm gonna reach and take Josh Allen.
Yes.
Top fantasy quarterback for years to come, even without a number one wide receiver right now. Yeah. So a couple other guys I thought about here. Garrett Wilson, I already have a Jet. I can't take him. Jalen Waddle's a Dolphin. I don't want him. You took Marvin Harrison. So, yeah, I'm going to reach, take J17, and I'm going to be okay with it. So that concludes our sports fantasies with Miller and McCarty.
Hey,
one-round mock draft. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with you guys in just a few moments.